You are listening to the Composing Trust podcast by Culture Solutions, a series on European cultural action with the world. Is Europe still attractive? How is it perceived outside the EU? How do Europeans promote culture together in the world and with which partners? What have they learned together? What is their experience? Our Composing Trust podcast series will address these issues.
We are delighted to welcome you to this discussion focusing on international cultural relations. I'm Isabelle van de Geugte, and together with Alexandra Hill, we are honored to host this discussion. This podcast aims to provide a platform for non-EU experts to articulate their diverse perspectives and experiences in the field, as well as to offer recommendations for shaping international cultural relations strategies and practices.
We will explore the varied meanings of this term in different contexts and broaden our awareness of international cultural relations strategies beyond the European Union. Therefore, this podcast will bring a diversity of voices and perspectives from experts in various geographical contexts.
The two episodes that follow seek to contribute to the recognition of the myriad of understandings, reasonings, and realities that coexist within the realm of international cultural relations.
And now it's time for our contributors to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Katarina Kravchuk. I'm a co-founder of Lanka Pro Collective from Ukraine.
My name is Plern Prim. I'm the executive director of Living Arts International, which is an organization that came out of 25 years on the ground with Cambodian living arts.
My full name is Samantha Sekai Nengomasha. I'm based in Zimbabwe, where I work in an international human rights organization.
My name is Lavina Wirawan. I am Chinese Indonesian born and currently living and working in Jakarta. I am a producer specializing in artistic collaborations, festivals, creative exchanges. I am also arts manager for British Council in Indonesia.
I'm Ilham Khattab. I'm based in Cairo, Egypt, and I am a curator, art manager, and researcher. I'm also the founder of Out of the Circle organization.
My name is Andrea Dempster-Chung, and I'm speaking from Kingston, Jamaica today. I'm a structural engineer turned cultural activist. I run an arts nonprofit in Kingston called Kingston Creative.
My name is George Abungu. I am from Kenya, and I'm an archaeologist and a heritage expert for Kenya. In addition to that, I am Emeritus Director General of the National Museums of Kenya.
I'm Lindsay Amini. I'm the Director of Cultural Programs at Meridian International Center, a public diplomacy non-government organization based in Washington, D.C.
So, Isabel, although international cultural relations hasn't been defined as a clear, sharp concept, can we at least know what is at the core of it? What is the general understanding here in Europe?
Sure, the term has different definitions, and one understanding is that international cultural relations are based on interaction between different cultures with a focus on intercultural dialogue, mutual understanding, and benefit. It's a two-way conversation. It can be undertaken by civil society or governmental actors. But with the latter, the frontier with cultural diplomacy can be blurred, as often government actors tend to pursue their country's strategic interests and values.
Thank you. You know, I've also asked this question to our interviewees, and many interesting, slightly different elements came to the table. Would you like to hear their views on that?
Sure. I'm curious to discover how it's perceived outside Europe.
I think the international cultural relations should be international. It should not be European, it should not be American, it should not be African, it should not be Asian. It should be international by the name. Unfortunately, getting things international which means bringing partners from every part of the world is not an easy thing. And so I think by it starting in Europe and spreading in other parts, getting stakeholders and building a true international cultural relations, for me, is a very good thing. So for me, I think it is a good, it's a very, very good concept. I think it's a good thing, but I think it will have to move and grow out of basically just the European Union to get buy-in from every segment of every part of the world.
The term international cultural relations is not really used that much within the scope of public diplomacy. And honestly, most Americans that I talk to about ICR, they really think that term refers more to an academic focused approach to communications. So really, for me, cultural diplomacy goes beyond the government to government and to include people to people.
So when I think about international cultural relations, Jamaica is a prime example. That natural and organic cultural relations that we have had throughout our diaspora in the US, in the UK, all around the world, has developed the Jamaican brand. It's developed a lot of partnerships. It's brought a lot of revenue to Jamaican creatives and to the country. And that is usually without the intervention of governments and organizations. This is usually based on the efforts of, individuals. Then you have your intentional or strategic cultural relations, which I believe can lead to social transformation, economic transformation, skills transfer, and has all of those kind of benefits. But each way, whether it's natural and organic, or whether it's intentional, strategic, has a light side and a shadow side, right? Positive, negative. They can be exploitative or they can be mutually beneficial, depending on how we approach it.
These were George, Lindsay, and Andrea, arguing the universality of international cultural relations as a concept built through individual efforts with an influence beyond national borders. The importance of giving voice and empowering local communities for a fluent exchange all around the globe is also raised, as you will now listen to Caterina, Floeum, Levina, and Sam.
International cultural relations are now one of the most important ways for us as Ukrainians to be a subject to international dialogue. So to have this agency to be heard as we want it to be heard, to have our right to our own narrative. And also it's a chance for us to build communication and dialogue with the countries in the world that have been always out of the focus of our attention. For example, it's really important now for Ukrainians to speak with people and communities from Latin America, from Africa, from Southeast Asia, from South Asia, because we actually have more in common than we thought, and we never actually explored that. So for us, it's really important on the both bottom-up level and also state level.
The last 10, 15 years, our focus is really to support young generation of artists that came out of the tragedy and the history of Cambodia. For us, when it comes to international cultural relationship, it's that expansion of knowledge, of perspective, of engagement that enrich, in fact, local perspective, local know-how, local creativity, but that is fed by connecting with peers regionally and internationally. So I think this is kind of my point of view and how important, in fact, ICR are in terms of helping and keep helping to develop the cultural sector.
The diversity of Indonesia, like without talking about international scale, like internally, Indonesia with its massive diversity is already like doing cultural relations as a second nature, whether or not we want to label it that or not, because, there's that diversity and, how we can stay united as a nation. One of the ways is definitely have to relate to one another. So yeah, maybe the term is coined by Europe, but it is something that I think Indonesia could definitely relate with.
In my particular context, international cultural relations encompasses the aspect of people first. So bringing diverse people together, and how we do it locally is we bring collaborations amongst Africans. So our approach is very Pan-African, which means that it's centered and driven from the Africans themselves. We also have this particular focus on the young people because we value their impact in society. We know they are our greatest resource, and we also know that they are the cultural actors in society. So we do believe in the transformative power of arts and media and how these can contribute to mutually beneficial understanding among people of different nations, races, classes. I would say for me, international cultural relations is about embracing that diversity, respecting different forms of knowledge in its plurality, as well as facilitating the meaningful contributions so that overall we move together, we develop together, we know each other, and we live together in harmony.
While diverse in their perspectives on international cultural relations, all invitees agree on several elements. Mainly, they emphasize on the importance of people-to-people exchanges, sharing local viewpoints and creativity, from small communities to larger audiences in different regions of the world. These exchanges may bring tailored solutions to current global challenges.
Yes, and one interesting point is that international cultural relations should be a truly international experience and not as a relationship between the West and the rest of the world. Our experts even stressed that international cultural relations is happening without involving the global North.
To delve deeper into the subject, we ask our interviewees what they perceive as the added value of international cultural relations.
Cultural relations should be an advocacy platform. It can also help, for example, in developing partnership. We are talking about co-creation, co-curation, co-exhibition, co-researching. Those are areas that we need in the cultural sector here. We need to be able to do that. And I think international cultural relations can be able to create that sort of, a bridge between countries here, institutions here, with other parts of the world. And I think international cultural relations can play a critical role also as a bridge in creating this global awareness in areas like human rights, like climate change, and other areas.
I think there is a lot of value in international cultural relations. I think culture is a language that transcends, a lot of the boundaries, barriers that we put. And I think it can be a really powerful tool in decolonization, in challenging notions of colonialism.
I think one area where ICR is especially well suited is in conflict transformation. And that can be supporting freedom of expression. While the arts might not fully resolve a conflict, they are definitely a space for expression and healing. And then that can also lead to building resiliency for individuals and community. And that's really where I see that ICR can create those safe spaces, whether those are physical spaces or more in the emotional, mental realm.
The first is to look at how we are doing our cultural relations. What is the purpose of doing cultural relations? If our goal is to have diversity and inclusion, then we are going to look into processes such as decentralization, and we are going to make them long-term by sustaining them, by giving power to the people. So establishing local ownership, I think that is the best way to just break through and be sustainable with our approach. I do think there are many reasons why we engage in cultural relations, but those that would have meaning for us in local context are those that contribute to our local development. And what we try to focus on, or what we pride ourselves in our Pan-African approaches, is the cohesion, because we have spirits of Ubuntu, which is like oneness of everyone. I am because you are. So our approach is very communal. It involves people, it's people-centered. So when we talk of Pan-African approaches, we're looking at how do we all come together, how do we establish this shared understanding of our identities, being diverse as we are, and how do we move forward?
Our focus is looking at more of the community-driven work. So yes, while the funding might come from a government, where our strength lies is trying to find the local actors on the ground that are going to have the most impact on the community. And it's something that we're constantly talking to our funders about is, look, we want to have a community-driven approach. because we want to hear what those needs are, and we want to make sure that that's what we're addressing, not just these overarching goals that a government might have.
International cultural relations can have economic benefits. So we would do an exchange program, say, with Gabe, an artist from Germany. He came to the Edna Manley College of the Visual and Performing Arts, which is the only art school in Jamaica. And then we were able to collaborate with the German embassy, and he was the artist who came and collaborated with the Jamaican artist to create a mural in the art district. Now, there have been a few of these international artists that have come in to do murals in the art district. And what does that do? It raises the profile of the art district. It shifts the narrative around downtown Kingston from maybe, the crime and the warfare and whatever, So in shifting those narratives, bringing more visitors in, just that international collaboration on the murals makes that district a little higher profile.
Mutuality, engagement with communities, the capacity to contribute to conflict resolution, and the economic advantages that international cultural relations can bring were some of the ideas presented by George, Andrea, Lindsay, and Sam. Caterina, from the delicate situation her country is living in, brings on the potential arts and culture can have during conflict for tangible and intangible heritage preservation, strongly linked to communities' memories and identity.
So if you talk about international cultural relations during the war in Ukraine now, there is two separate tracks: work with Ukraine and work with Russia. International community can do many things for both topics. For us, it is very important that in the interactions with not only European, but international community, this dignity, this agency is celebrated of Ukrainians, of Ukrainian narrative. And also sensitive dialogue in terms of that cultural heritage is being ruined every day, that cultural heritage is being stolen, and recognition of that. This is actually the damage to the cultural heritage of all of us, right? Because cultural heritage of every country is cultural heritage of the global community. This is something that is important for us in this dialogue with international community. And after the war, of course, I wish all of us that there is a dialogue between all countries, and international cultural relations can actually help to foster that dialogue, to rebuild the links that are broken. I'm talking most of all about interpersonal links, not only about institutions, but interpersonal links.
Katharina stressed the often understated power of cultural relations to rebuild dialogue following a situation of conflict. Now, if we look at climate change, this is also an area where international cultural relations have a key role to play, as the problem must take into account the local cultural context, while international exchanges are crucial to tackle this global challenge. Let's hear from Levina, George, Katerina, and Andrea.
There's like that transformative power where arts and culture could play a significant role in responding to climate emergency. Of course, it is very important to understand climate emergency is being responded differently across the different parts of the world. I think the idea that I want to stress is that we do the effort as far as possible and as practicable. Like, we know that the arts and cultural sector have that extraordinary inventiveness to make sense of what kind of climate solutions would meet people's needs and aspirations in a particular context. It's very different to, let's say, statistics or facts or research. Through arts and culture, it is a little bit more gentle and more organic way of sharing the truth, of creating the space to think and to respond or express towards an issue more organically.
Culture or heritage is always at the back, is never in the front. They will talk about health, they'll talk about water, they'll talk about agriculture, they will talk even about tourism and other things, but never talk about art. If indeed cultural relations is also going to be a platform for artists and others to be able to be heard and be supported, then I think that it can play a role in Kenya and in Africa. People in the cultural and art sector. They need to be able to be part and parcel of the bigger discussion when it comes to economic development, to nation building, to identity, climate change issues, and many others. Climate change is a critical area, particularly in Africa, where we are contributing very little towards the problem, and yet we are the greatest victims. And I think through cultural relations with other parts of the world, we will start to understand more our responsibilities, and we understand more about those other parts.
When it comes to the climate change, we are now one of the most polluted countries in the world when it comes to areas that are mined and water pollution, soil pollution. So for us, it's really important to talk about the land as integral part of culture. Land is very important for Ukrainians as a cultural asset. We have one of the richest soil in Ukraine. So for us, talking about culture is talking about land in very complex understandings.
In Jamaica, if you have roads that need to be fixed, if you have hospitals that need to be built, art is not a major priority, and neither is climate change. People speak about net zero and they assume that, net zero is something that concerns everybody. No, if you don't have water, sanitation, if you're dealing with basic development issues, net zero is like, what is that? This is not a concern. And so, not to put it so bluntly, of course, there's people here who care about the climate and we're very affected by climate change, sea level rise. But it would be hard for us to find a way to bring a focus to and to find funding for artists responding to climate change. But in partnership with these international organizations, we're able to join voices and have a stronger voice and communicate a stronger message.
This was very interesting, Isabel. Our experts from Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Americas have stressed the importance of an approach that is rooted in an open dialogue through deep listening. International cultural relations inclusive practices should consider the diversity of voices and perspectives, accounting for specific sensitivities and cultural needs, therefore empowering local communities, encouraging more and more people-to-people exchanges and co-creation practices all around the globe.
Yes, indeed, Alexandra. And I'm really looking forward to our next episode when our experts will discuss decolonization of practices, North-South relations, and international cultural relations as a transversal approach.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of our Composing Trust podcast by Culture Solutions. If you liked it, you can subscribe and follow us on your favorite podcast platforms and contact us at culturesolutions.eu.